Yeah. So let me introduce our session for our viewer. So in this era of hysterectomy, what I feel that like the buccal, which was once upon a time the hero of all retinal surgeries, now probably I can tell you that it is a forgotten hero. Okay, so probably this session will help, because sometimes we ask the newcomer they about the fundus drawing, how to do the drawing and how to trace the blood vessels and how to do a buccal. They told usually they are totally blank. So in this the purpose of this academic meet is to highlight the what was buccal and what is the correct technique and where you can do that, and of course what are the complications and what are the limitation. Okay, let me this is our uh, the total topic, and let me introduce our all speaker to the viewer. So our first speaker is Dr. Krishnendu Nandi, who is a senior vitreoretinal consultant and the director of the Netralam Specialty Eye Hospital, Calcutta, who has almost 11-year experience as a consultant in retina. The second speaker is Dr. Tapas Ranjan Padi, who is trained in Shankar Nethralaya and working in LB Prasad Eye Institute, Bhubaneswar, and he also trained in Michigan University, USA. He has special interest in ROP, electrophysiology, and retinal dystrophy. He is the head of head of the pediatric retina department of LB Prasad Eye Institute, Bhubaneswar, with a 14-year experience. So the most important speaker who will highlight about all the steps of a good buccal surgery is Dr. Saurabh Sinha, who was a former consultant of Shankar Nethralaya Chennai, Shankar Nethralaya Calcutta, and he is the director of Netralayam with an experience of almost around more than 20 years. Who is nowadays he is the teacher of all the teacher of the junior consultants. So let's welcome sir. My fourth speaker is Dr. Arun Bhargav, who is my best friend. We finished our fellowship consultant together in Shankar Nethralaya. After that, he has started his own institute. He is the director, founder of the Retina Specialty Hospital, which is one of the biggest eye hospital in central Calcutta. Within his 14 years of experience, he has done more than 15,000 of retinal surgeries. So, work-wise, one of the highest volume surgeon in India. Then next is me, and my last speaker is Dr. Kumar Saurabh, who is a senior vitreoretinal consultant in Shankar Nethralaya, Calcutta, and a great academician who are having multiple presentation, multiple publications, and most important, he is the editorial board of so many journals also. So, welcome, Dr. Saurabh, and welcome all. So, my first topic is by Dr. Krishnendu, who will tell about what are the ancient story of the buccal and how to do a good drawing and what are the limitation of buccal. So I'm handing over the session to Dr. Krishnendu.
Good evening, everybody. So this is my honor to be present in front of such stalwarts, and I would like to thank Dr. SSP, Dr. Shama Shakshar Paul, for giving me the opportunity to present topic in scroll buckle. So, Dr. Paul, you have to unshare so that I can share my slides.
Yeah. I'm just I think that is not opening, right? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. So I'll be speaking about basics of squirrel buckle, a little bit of introduction in history of squirrel buckle. So it's an almost forgotten art. Uh, this is a brief history about in first person who appreciate the pathological significance and therapeutic effect of closing retinal break is Jules Konin. And then it start the saga of developing scroll buckle. In 1930, Rosengren first tried the intravitreal ear injection. And then 1933, Dutzman, who tried the cryopexy for retinal detachment surgery. Then 1949, it's Custodis who gave the concept of scroll buckling and which was redefined by Skippens in 1957. And 1950, Skippens also introduced the indirect ophthalmoscopy, which has changed everything about the retinal detachment surgery. And 1964, Linkoff bring his rule, Linkoff rule, which is famous about Linkoff rule. And 1985, Gilbert and McLeod successfully done the surgery with vitrectomy with a fluid air exchange. So this is in nutshell brief history about the retinal detachment surgery. So before undertaking a retinal detachment case, we have to see few things carefully, like the type of retinal detachment, whether it is actually digmatogenous or not, the extent of detachment, whether macula is attached or detached, the previous status, anatomical and visual outcome, and the prognosis, like retinal recurrent detachment, and the status of the fellow. These are important points before taking up the case for the surgery. Let us see a case scenario. This is about a 45-year-old male with a vision in the right eye was counting finger 3 meter. This case was operated by my senior in Shankar Netralaya. This is left eye vision was 6 by 6 and 6. Anterior segment was patient having phakic eye in both eyes, with people showing a little bit of RAPD in the right eye. Applanation tonometry was 10-meter marker in both eyes. And this is the retinal picture, which showing there is a macula of retinal detachment with large multiple breaks in the infratemporal quadrant. And if you can see, there is a subretinal gliosis at the supratemporal region, and there is a large break at the infratemporal quadrant, and there is a macula is detached. Left eye is taken care of by laser photocoagulation at the infratemporal and inferior quadrant. So this is the large diagram which shows the extent of retinal detachment, and there is a multiple lattices at the supratemporal and superior region, and the large break at the equatorial region. There is a subretinal gliosis, and there is a large cystic changes in the retina inferior quadrant. So this diagram actually important to localize the break in order to prevent jaggeries or difficulties during the intraoperative procedures. So this patient, we have planned buckle, and we have done the buckle with a 280 scroll buckle, and this is the drainage site, the P1, and 240 instaclage also placed. So the treatment option of any detachment surgery is a buckle, scroll buckle, either with drainage or without drainage, along with the instaclage, or it's a choice of the surgeon, and can be treated with the pneumatic retinopexy or primary vitrectomy or combination of all above. So main purpose of the buccal is to close the retinal hole, to relieve any vitreoretinal traction, to bring the retina close to the RP, displaces the fluid into the vitreous cavity from the subretinal space, and retinopexy to close the primary break. So before there used to be two type of buckle, either explant or implant. Implant we usually practice today. We usually practice the explant. Explant can be radial, can be segmental, can be intraclavicular. Explant is little advantageous because it is shallower. There is a less chance of intrusion. It is technically easier, and careful placement of suture is important in case of explant. And preoperative assessment is definitely important before taking up any scroll buckle case. Detailed history to be taken, and we have to find out the causative break and any other lesions is there or not, and we have to check the other eye in order to find any breaks or lesion in the other eye. Fundus diagram is most important, and the preoperative plan. Linkoff give us little bit of idea where could be the causative break in case of any kind of rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, but it holds good only if there is a single break. This is an example of color diagram where it shows there is a break at the superior 12 o'clock position with a localized RD, superior and supranasal area, and there is an area of lattice degeneration with a hole with a thin retina, infratemporal, and the retinal schisis in the infranasal radian. Now, whether to do buckle or not to do buckle. Mostly the indication of scleral buckle is a peripheral depressible break with rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, small breaks, single or few breaks, absence of extensive proliferative vitreoretinal changes. We can opt up to A and B type of PVR changes, and clear media. In presence of vitreous hemorrhage or any inflammatory changes, we cannot go ahead with the buckle. Other cases, we can opt for vitrectomy. Now, we often choose the non-absorbable buckle like silicone or hydrogel or sponge, and it is the surgeon choice which he wants to do with the buckle, either silicones or sponge. There are different types of buckle material available. You can go through this diagram. There is a different type of buckle and intraclutch which is available in the market. And size of the buckle is very important in order to give success or vision to the patient in order to settle the retina. And that can be dealt later on by the consecutive speakers. Thank you. Thank you for your patience hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnendu, for the very brief and nice description how we should first step for the buckle. Now I'll invite Dr. Tapas Ranjan Padi for his talk. He is speaking that whether we want to do a only buckle or a combination of the both, or in which case exclusively, which case only vitrectomy. So, Dr. Tapas, please.
So, very good afternoon. Is my screen visible? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Both, yes.
So I go directly to the next slide. The scleral buckling for rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, the outcome depends on many factors. As we discussed, especially for the beginners, the case selection and understanding the retinal detachment configuration is very crucial. Thorough pre-op fundus evaluation is a must, because in BG OPD, many times we skip cases and try to finish quickly. So it's very important to take time to understand the morphology and find out all the primary and the associated breaks for a successful outcome. Finally, on table, the primary break, the primary lesion need to be treated, need to be supported on the buccal hump, and has to be flat on the buccal. Addressing the residual fluid communicating with the brake also is important. Finally, management of complications on table or during follow-up. As we can see here, this the case of 40-year-old male with a bullous RD, and there is a brake here, lattice with a brake here. So one may consider a pneumoretinopathy or scleral buckle. Actually, a closer look revealed that there are multiple small holes at the periphery as well. So these are the cases, and the vitreous is PVD is not clinically, PVD is not there. Young patient, phakic patient, the treatment of choice should be scleral buckle. The fundus preoperative fundus evaluation, I stress it again, is very crucial. Takes time, laborious, but it gives you in terms of the good result and good outcome. It helps one to find out last minute change in the retinal detachment configuration. I remember a case of PVD induced retinal break and detachment. So I saw 2 days ago in the OPD, and the day of surgery, just before I posted for scleral buckle, and just before anesthesia, and when I saw there were multiple rows of retinal breaks, and now it is no more buckleable. So it's very important to reconfirm the configuration pre-op. Now, drawing the fundus helps one to determine the primary break, where it is located, and all the associated retinal lesions that need to be addressed during the surgery. During the surgery, it reduces the time in localization of the break and hastens the surgery. We all know that during surgery, the cornea becomes hazy, then you miss a EG break. So this fundus drawing is crucial for a successful outcome. Evaluation of the vitreous status is also important. As we can see here, young phakic patients with formed vitreous are the ones ideal for scleral buckle. The vitreous here acts as a biotamponade for the break. The detachment tends to progress slower, and they do well with scleral buckle. Now, in terms of rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, I would request you all to understand the two types of retinal detachment that is seen. One with a tear, where horseshoe tear, where the vitreous is still attached with the break margin, and usually these breaks are these breaks enlarge, the detachment progress faster. They are associated with liquefied vitreous, and there are chances of multiple breaks. So the vitrectomy is a better choice compared to the break, where you see a very small atrophic break, as we can see in the figure B, and where the vitreous is separated, and these detachments tend to be small, and they progress very slow. They are very good candidate for scleral buckle. The picture here shows a 14-year-old male, the right eye, old RD, post-trauma, vitreous is still attached, not separated, thin retina, subretinal gliosis, peripherally there is a dialysis not shown here, and the formed vitreous. The treatment of choice would be scleral buckle. Sometimes the retina is so thin, attempt to go inside to vitrectomy, remove all the bands and settle it can be counterproductive at times. 24-year albinotic male with rhegmatogenous retinal detachment, macula on temporal break, RRD, and we anticipate that the laser burns might not come well, and the vitreous separation would be difficult as there is no PVD yet. So posted for scleral buckle, non-drainage procedure. The break was supported over the buckle, but there was a little bit of a jet of fluid communicating with the subretinal fluid, communicating with the break. So a gas bubble was given and the patient was positioned. The gas bubble got displaced, but subretinal fluid stayed for a long period of time, up to 4 to 5 months, and finally settled. So we did not take this patient again for the surgery, because I was sure that the primary pathology is supported on the buckle, and after the gas got absorbed, there was no fluid communicating with the brain. Sometimes you come across a badly traumatized eye where the retina almost becomes necrotic, and as you can see, it rolls back, as we can see here. So these retina are so friable that when one goes inside and does vitrectomy while removing vitreous, one can eat away the retina. So again, these are the cases where I usually prefer scleral buckle or a buckle with vitrectomy, as we can see here. And this is the 6 weeks post-surgery. The break is supported well. Blunt trauma with sieve-like multiple retinal break, as we can, the previous one, we saw a very large break, inferior, large and inferior break. Here there are multiple retinal breaks. Again, chronic detachment, the scleral buckle is the treatment of choice. Now, vitrectomy is preferred for cases with acute PVD, bullous retinal detachment, multiple ongoing breaks. Acute PVD can land with multiple breaks in the subsequently. Multiple non-bucklable tears or pseudophakic retinal detachment, or a large posterior break. Extensive PVR more than grade C2, again another relative indication for vitrectomy, except the stop and go type of chronic detachment, where we can see here is a small break where the detachment happens, then stops there for some more time, then slowly progresses with subretinal band. Even if it is the grade C PVR, still here the buckle is the treatment of choice. Pseudophakic retinal detachment, usually vitrectomy is my preference over scleral buckle because of higher chance of advanced vitreous liquefaction and PVD because of old age, absence of crystalline lens, and usually majority had PVD by more than 70 to 80% of cases after 6 months. Capsular opacification can hinder peripheral view. Small tiny breaks can happen posterior to the ora serrata that can be missed with indirect ophthalmoscopy. So usually here is the the vitrectomy is preferred over scleral buckle. Complex retinal detachment, like here the one is showed here, where we have a big large area of avascularity, large broad prolif adhering to the retina, and sometimes vitrectomy alone might be difficult, and vitrectomy with buckle and a broad band to support the avascular retina is a good option. So buccal vitrectomy, these are my indications: very large inferior and anterior break, complex RDs, as we saw here, FEVR, ROP, or big retinal angiomas sitting at the periphery, or a very firmly adherent large peripheral prolif over a ischemic retina, where during dissection one can turn away the retina. These are the cases where I prefer scleral buckle along with the vitrectomy. Sometimes young myope with rows of extensive lattices and multiple breaks, both posterior and anterior, again, the combination therapy is preferable. Settling retina with scleral buccal vitrectomy, to summarize, the young age, small atrophic buccaleable hole, shallow detachment, attached hyaloid, scleral buckle is the preferred choice. Rhegmatogenous retinal detachment with advanced PVR, vitrectomy preferable over buckle, except grade C PVR with extensive subretinal band. Fluid vitreous, bullous RD, hazy media, posterior multiple breaks, pseudophakic RD, vitrectomy is my preference over buckle. Of course, high myopic RDs, scleral buckle or vitrectomy depending upon the extent of the lesions, location of the lesion, extent of lattices, vitreous status. Finally, for complex RD with progressive vitreoretinal traction, combination of therapy works well. I thank you all for the opportunity and conclude my talk here.
Thank you, Tapas. Few questions. One question came for Dr. Krishnendu. Hello, Dr. Krishnendu?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, one question came for you. Somebody asked that, like, if there is no break, you depress and you find no break, so still you prefer to go for a scleral buckle, or like you prefer to go for vitrectomy?
First, I have to exclude the possibility of exudative detachment, whether
Exactly.
it is
No,
rhegmatogenous
actually,
or exudative.
they mentioned that, like, okay, we have excluded the exudative nature, but still we can't find any break. But clinically it's look like a rhegmatogenous retinal detachment. Okay.
Then I don't have any other option other than going for vitrectomy rather than doing scleral buckle.
Thank you. And one question for Dr. Tapas. how long you can wait for SRF before going for a vitrectomy?
Yeah, so usually if the primary brake is well supported and the fluid is not communicating with the primary brake, I can wait up to 2 years also. So usually the fluid goes off within 3 to 6 months, and sometimes they stay up to 2 years. And also I've seen cases where they go off after 2 years.
I totally agree.
Just I want to interfere. You don't think like that? Suppose the fluid is for a long time, there is a irreversible changes in the photoreceptor layer. So in that case, still you prefer to wait for a long time, or it will
Can I come in? Sorry. Can I come in?
Yes, sir.
I totally agree with
Welcome, sir.
Tapas. I totally agree with Tapas. Fluid we can tolerate fluid. I agree with you also. Of course, the fluid has the macula, and the macula is not attached. They definitely need to do surgery. I think what Tapas is referring to, fluid persisting posterior to the buccal, macula is attached. Nothing more to be done. OCT shows macula attached. Leave it as it is. Leave the fluid there, and wait for 6 months at least. If macula is detached, I'm sure all of us will want to go in for resurgery at that point. Even if brake is attached, and you'll have to see how much of difficulty the patient is causing for you, not vision for the patient is for you. I think we'll have to go for resurgery. I want to add one more point before I start. Brake not found. I'll be a little different. If it's pseudophakic patient, I would be very quick on starting a vitrectomy immediately and putting in whatever I feel is necessary on table. But if it is a phakic young patient, I would put in a belt buckle also along with vitrectomy. Whether I'm using gas or oil is a different point altogether. But I would put in a belt buckle. If I'll plan for a belt buckle. I'll put in a belt buckle before I start my vitrectomy. That's one safety point I would do. Of course, all of us are doing less and less of belt buckles nowadays. Shall I start?
Yes, sir. So now I welcome Dr. Saurav Sinha. He will explain all the steps how to do a good buckle.
Not in 10 minutes. Right. So I'm going to talk about the steps of surgery, and I'm trying to give 3 points on each step. When we do peritomy, this is a video given by Dr. Krishnendu. He's been kind enough to give it to me. I want you to note how the scissors are and how each time he holds the forceps, I'm showing you the pointer over here, he leaves, lets go and holds it each time he goes ahead. And it's otherwise, and you have to undermine the sclera over there, the small snips he's making beautifully over here. And then he undermines the conjunctiva and sclera. Then don't go in one shot, going tuck and cutting over there. It's small, very careful, artistic steps, not pushing your way through. If you see now again, yeah, he brings it over here. And again, he goes very slowly, small steps at a time. The conjunctival opening is very important. The peritomy is very important over here, because if you do this, try to do this very quickly, you'll have sclera left behind. All your steps from muscle tagging, and these are the extensions that he's making. He's showing laterally and temporally. Dr. Nandi, I agree with him. This is from the textbook. I like to make it inferotemporally, supranasally. Both are fine, whichever you're comfortable with. One point here is also, if you have a bleb in place of a buckle, which you want to do a buckle, then it is possibly better to go behind 6 millimeters behind the limbus and make an opening over there, and so you can preserve the bleb. As regards muscle tagging, once you've done once you finished your peritomy, take a coordinate applicator and push the conjunctiva behind as much as possible in all the 4 quadrants to try and isolate the muscles over there. Once you've done that, try to use the tooth forceps as less as possible. More of the coordinate applicator to push back tissues over here, and try not to hold the muscle with your tooth. Pull through over here and smoothly take it out. Now this, and of course, I have distant and proximal knot to for the muscle tagging. The superior muscle in your tagging, the temporal, the lateral and the middle ones should be pulled down, and the superior muscle can be tagged easily over there. Once you've localized, cryo should be done standing up. Don't try to sitting down with your indirect. Over there, one tip is to have adjust the indirect before you sit down for surgery, before you scrub. Leave it like that, RSK assisted. And when you do cryo, don't keep going on and on, burning the white retina over there. Of course, you need to do confluent burns, but cryo should be a little bit modified as to not be overdo the cryo, because you end up having a ERM formation and attached retina later on otherwise.
and otherwise face pain also. As regards to suture placement, again, this video is by Dr. Krishnendu. So it's important that I've hold it here. So these two muscles are pulled by the assistant over here. You take the suture very carefully anteriorly, measure and go posteriorly, and this is your retractor holding it back. So it should be centered over here to your vision also. It's not should be twisted to the other side. And make sure you pull the suture all the way through so the road doesn't get entangled over there. And now you go horizontally and use a cotton lift applicator. Assisted use a cotton applicator. You use that to hold back the, and this is the very carefully with the assisted. This distance, yeah, this is the step I was going to talk about. This suddenly, is my video visible, Sakshar? Yeah. So, and take the knot and leave it over there. Now, one can, I'll show the video here again. So this is this muscle tagged sutures over here. This, that means you're sitting on my side and this is the inferior part over here. This three, that is a muscle tagging, and this triangle over here, these three parts over here, at the center that your belt buckle should come with the buckle knife over here, which is a partial thickness clear over here. Some people do want to put a suture over there. I'm okay with that. Problem with suture exposure later on, buckle infections and all. And so this is a much easier, faster, less traumatic step. You just make two parallel incisions. Make sure these are wide enough, not too close. Again, not too wide, then it won't be very snug otherwise. Yeah. And just go through horizontal, make sure your hands goes, and very important, use a cotton tip applicator, turn the eyeball a little bit onto the side that you want to push it. These small steps, use the other hand very carefully also is very important. Right. Now, when you do the buckle looks large and big. You must use a Alabama forceps to hold the buckle and a tooth forceps to hold the other, push the switches on the other side. It's more of a pushing and pulling technique. Don't keep shoving and pushing the buckle over there. It's very traumatic otherwise. So what was shown over here was both sides were taken. Once you've done that, the belt buckle, the 240 can be placed on the one side over here. This is a little long video. I want to show how the assistant should keep pulling and be in synchrony with what you are doing. And you have to also make sure at any given time that this buckle doesn't get twisted. And if you saw the leading edge that has had a sort of arrow kind of a cut over there, so there's each time the assistant pulls the muscle to the other side towards away from you, and you can go through over there. Again, like I said, pushing and pulling, not always jamming through over there. You push to one side, pull out for the other side, and the buckle goes around all the way through. Again, yeah, very gently hold the conjunctiva over there. No major. Also, the muscle hook can be used very gently to push the conjunctiva back. No, not necessarily use the retractor at all given times. See exactly, this is the muscle hook over here, being gently pushed the conjunctiva back and gently being pushed over here. This needs to be very gentle. It's not a very aggressive, like depressing while you're doing a vitrectomy. If you push hard, no pushing and pulling hard away. Techniques of pushing and pulling should be there both ways. Again, assistant has to be very intelligent to understand what you want, moving the switches away from your view over here. Exactly. Take it away so that you know what's happening. You push from the side, change instruments. Maybe at this time, the Alabama on the left hand would have been a good idea, or whatever you're comfortable with, go through from the other side again. Immediately, the assistant knows they're trying to help over here, putting the switcher up for you. So your assistant has to be, I would suggest, train your assistant continuously and speak to them continuously what you want. Don't expect them to do things because you have to specify how you want things to be done. And you come down all the way through, you've gone to the other side, and you can now put your band tie over here and switch it, anchor it over there. Right. So this is your band tie. I'm stopping over here the video. This is the band tie over here, which should have been made over here. Now, pulling these two ends over here, tightening it is very important. Once you've tightened it, make sure there's no twisting over there. Push it back again. At this point, probably get up with the indirect, take a look again to see if there's any, that is assuming they finished your drainage over here. The drainage will cover one of the consequent speakers. So get up with the Don't be lazy every time to get up and see the indirect. It's important. Once you tighten so much, you feel the pressure is high, maybe do an AC paracentesis, again get up to see the redis pulsations are there. Cut it short or long as you feel that they should be buried under the suture. You see this one will go under the suture over here. Because at this stage, you finished your buccal, you leave it like this, very high chance that you'll have a buccal exposure here years later on. It will protrude through the conjunctiva. So one should think of short term and long term and go very gently and push it down over there, back over there. And it probably you can now, once that has gone inside, you can also, this knot can be buried under this, see beautifully snug over there. I think now the point remains that again, before I will start again. Yeah, I have a minute more. I will again go through all the steps again. In peritomy, be gentle to the conjunctiva. Don't be in a hurry to finish off the buccal over the conjunctiva, because the more hurried that you do over here, the more time you will need when you want to close the conjunctiva. So conjunctiva closure will take if you have really pulled apart during surgery, and once you finished, you push the eyeball over there, everything is okay. You will take another 20 minutes to close the conjunctiva. So open the conjunctiva very carefully. When you're taking buccal sutures, measure with your caliper, depending on the size, like what Dr. Krishna showed, the size of your buccal. Take 2 meters, so it's a 9 millimeter buccal. Then take 2 meters, 11 meters. Measure, no harm, no approximations. You don't want it to be, because if the measurements are wrong, the buccal will be pushing to the buccal will be difficult. Placement of the buccal will be difficult. 240, always advisable to have the two ends meet over the buccal itself, and so that it's easy to bury the ends under the suture and under the buccal itself. I think I'll stop with that. If there are any statement comments, I'll happy to take them. Thank you, Saksha, for the opportunity, and thank all of you. Arun, would wanting to meet you sometime also, and Tapas also. Thank you so much, Saksha.
Thank you, sir. Sir, one simple question, sir. Can you highlight a little bit about the cryo for our participant?
Right. Now, the cryo part is okay. I have this. I used to be very aggressive with our fellows at one time. The retinal surgeon needs to know how the cryo machine works. That's my first point. The cryo cylinder, how the wrench is supposed to open it and close it, how to look at the meter that it's working correctly or not, whether the gas cylinder is full or not. I think the first basic thing for the the starting VR fellow, VR surgeon is to see the cryo cylinder is working or not. When you're doing cryo, make sure you are not touching the screen. You have asked your assistant to see where your probe is. Very inadvertently, sometimes we keep it on the skin outside because you don't know when you're doing a repeat cryo again and again. Your hand has gone outside. So it's the assistant's duty to make sure you're on the sclera and not on the skin. When on the sclera, one should be very stable and should have a very good view of where your cryoprobe is indenting inside. Then only do you say on. And if within a few seconds you don't see the cryo burn, stop. I keep saying this again, stop. Don't keep doing things again. Visualize properly, put saline on the conjunctiva, on the cornea, make it clear, then do. And also, like I repeated before itself, do not overdo your cryo, because it will definitely lead to a lot of inflammation, a lot of pain for the patient, and chance of ERM formation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Dr. Arun. So he will tell you about the drainage and what different other type of buckles in our clinical practice. Arun, please.
So is my slide visible?
Yes.
So first of all, thank you, Dr. SSP. SSP is a driving force in my life, in fact, in my practice also. So wherever I am in trouble, he is there to save me. I'm also thankful to my team, Dr. Keshav Lahoti, Dr. Ekta Singh, and Dr. Amit Palkar. So I'll be talking about drainage and non-drainage and what is new in scleral buckling. So the outline of the presentation would be an evidence-based learning. There'll be certain cases that we'll discuss, and we'll be also sharing our surgical experiences. Although very limited experiences in front of sort of SSP, Krishnandu, they are doing so well. Tapas sir is doing so well, but still a little bit of our experience that we'll be sharing up. So as KNI, Krishnandu already highlighted the classical indication. One line, it is an uncomplicated rhegmatogenous retinal detachment up to PVR grade C1. Of course, preferred in young patients, phakic eyes, retinal detachment associated with retinal dialysis. So these are the cases where you will never want to do a buckle. So for the beginners, these are the cases where you would never prefer to end up in buckling. Vitrectomy is the choice. So the question now comes is to drain or not to drain. So after such an elaborative presentation by Saurav sir and a wonderful video by KNI, now when I talk about drainage, classically the drainage was described in eyes with pre-existing glaucoma, wherein the elevated intraocular pressure resulting from the drainage surgery may aggravate the optic nerve damage. Chronic retinal detachments, bullous retinal detachments, RPs, even when you are attempting a surgery for Coats disease. So these are the cases where you would classically consider doing a drainage. So drainage can be avoided in certain situations also, especially when you have an apposition of RP and the retina that is attained by the buccal indent. Fresh rhegmatogenous retinal detachments with attachment of retina despite shallow fluid overlying the buccal break from the RP. The possible mechanism in non-drainage that works is the displacement of subretinal fluid away from the break. Reduction of vitreoretinal traction, which can be achieved by displacement of the eyeball and the retina. Post-operative increase in the buccal height and increase in the resistance to fluid flow through the retinal break by alteration of the shape of the eyeball. So we're going to describe a case of a 20-year-old female, diminution of vision in left eye since last 6 months, no history of trauma, OD 6-9, OS, counting finger close to face, intraocular pressure 12 and 14 respectively, anterior segment within normal limits. So as you can see, there's a temporal detachment, OCT collaborates, there's an intraretinal cyst, and we always think, what will be your plan? Would you be planning for a vitrectomy, scleral buckling, 6-month-old? We decided to go ahead with buckle, young, phakic, single break, formed vitreous. As Dr. Tapas was saying, the role of formed vitreous, which kind of act as a biotamponade, and scleral buckling was performed. So we did a Chandler assisted scleral buckling. We did a segmental 240 encerclage with subretinal fluid drainage. And on marking the break, it was beneath the lateral rectus, 3 millimeters from the insertion, and the result was wonderful. So what should be the location of subretinal fluid drainage site? It should be ideally on the either side of the horizontal recti due to the relative avascularity of the beneath the area of maximum subretinal fluid, away from the retinal break to avoid the inadvertent drainage of liquid vitreous through the perforating site, beneath the fixed fold or a subretinal gliatic band, and ideally beneath the buccal. So this is the classical description. Now let's go on to the noble techniques, or I would not merely call as the noble technique, but I will say alteration in the technique of buckling. So one of the controversial was the Chandler assisted buckling surgery. So in our center, we call this as the CABS. And yes, honestly speaking, most of my buckling has now shifted towards Chandler assisting. So this was classically described in 2012 by Alderman et al. In the paper which was published in the European Society. It capitalizes on the wide angle visualizing technique. The advantage is towards the performance and teaching of the scleral buckling also. It kinds of also reduces the times where the surgical time reduces, as well as the corneal edema, which with prolonged surgery can be an issue. So we use here a 25 gauge system, which is a Chandler system, which is constellation based. So this was the original paper, the strategy for management of uncomplicated retinal detachment by Elderman, which was published as the first report of the European Vitreoretinal Society retinal detachment study. So how do you go about it? You perform a conventional periphtectomy, do the muscle tagging. So it's as the conventional. Ideally, the Chandler should be fixed in 180 degrees opposite. We use the biome system for the wide viewing. However, we have found that IBOS can be an issue because of the bulkiness of it. Chandler assisted break localization is done. Plug while buckling, deplug for buckling, and visualization. So you could see in the picture that the break is clearly visible. So what is the advantages of this? It kinds of improves the visualization of the retinal breaks. it reduces the chances of missed breaks, which could be possible with 20 diopters. It definitely enhances the efficiency, shortens the duration of the procedure. So I would here highlight that shortening the duration of the procedure is kind of beneficial when you're opting for buccal, because the shorter the duration, the corneal edema is less, the scraping of epithelium goes off, the visualization of the fundus is better. Yes, there are certain disadvantages, which over a period we've also learned. The major disadvantage was the vitreous prolapse. So to avoid that, we have started now using completely a wall trocar system. And we are very, very particular of plugging it. So when you're putting these, sometimes there is a chance that the chandelier can come out, especially when you're doing a cryo on one edge. So you should be very particular that the chandelier light system is fixed into the trocar. Yes, there is a rare occurrences reported of lens touch, endophthalmitis. There can be a poorer view in setting of cortical cataracts. So these are the certain disadvantages which we could be having. So we have done in about 12 patients. There were no trocar related breaks. In fact, there was no lens touch, no endophthalmitis, and we found out that it is working well. And we are now slowly in the progress of shifting from the conventional indirect ophthalmoscopy to the chandelier system. The second is the beauty of 240. So this is what we have been doing. So what is the beauty of 240? It is a 7mm broad band encircled around the globe, secured within the scleral pockets or sutured. So this is a simple 240 encirclage, which has completely settled the retina. So this we started about 6 years back. We started with the dialysis. So we thought, if for dialysis, why to put up a segmental buccal? Let's go with only encirclage. So this is one of the cases which I'm going to show. This was a BCVA OS counting figures 4 meters. Over a period of time, it improved to 6.9, and this was the beauty of encirclage. So what is our experience? We've been doing this, and we've been now doing it in a prospective study kind. We've enrolled almost 24 eyes. All have settled well because the case selection is very, very specific. The breaks are anterior. They are usually not multiple breaks. The size of the breaks have to be very taken up. There is a very detailed retinal drawing which is done. Unfortunately, we do not have the wide field fundus cameras, so we do a very detailed retinal drawing. And we found out that even at the end of 6 months of follow-up, there is no significant myopic shift that was noted. So one of the major concerns was that since the buccal height with 240 is maximum, so there can be a possible significant myopic shift in these patients. So there was not a very drastic significant myopic shift that was noticed. We are on a process of reviewing. It's under a review for an article. The other thing, which is the macular buccal. So macular buccal was ideally described for macular phoveoschisis, macular detachments, lamellar or full thickness macular holes with macular detachments. It was also for failed vitrectomy for MTM with posterior staphyloma. Rarely could be performed for optic disc maculopathy. So our experience was unfortunately not very good. And we did it for 2 eyes. Unfortunately, both failed. In fact, one, we had to remove the macular buccal. So what is the other areas where buccals could be done? So buccals in special conditions like Coats disease, retinopathy of prematurity, vasoproliferative tumor, FEVR stage 3, and angiomas could also be associated with peripheral tractional retinal detachments can be tried. And with this, I would like to pass the baton to Dr. SSP because he is going to talk about, in continuity about this, buccal in unusual situations. So I think I can lay a foundation for him to go ahead. Thank you all for your patient hearing. And it is an honor, Saurabh sir, to be with you, Tapas sir, Krishnendu, Dr. Kumar, Saurabh and Pal sir. Thank you so much for an opportunity. Thank you.
Dr. Arun, one question is there. Have you tried any 242 band?
So sorry, Pal sir, I couldn't hear the question completely.
Have you tried instead of 242 band 360 degree?
No, we've just tried the 240 encirclage only.
Okay.
I have used the 42 only, not 242, 42.
No, just 240. We are using just 240.
240, okay.
No. I have
used 42. Yes, sir, 42, only 42.
42, right.
Yeah. I have used a few 42. It's a little bulky, neither here, neither there. I remember my senior colleague Pratik Jansen used to use that a lot, just a variety, but I don't think it's, for me, it's either a 279, which is a 236 would be okay. 42 itself is not very helpful, I would say, even though you can get a good indentation with that.
Yeah, Dr. Sakhar, actually 42 I sometimes use, and I especially those it's wider than the 240. So wherever I want the brake is, if I feel that brake can't be covered adequately with 240 band, and a segmental buckle is not needed, I quite often use for the 42 band, and instead of putting a sleeve, I tie up the ends. So if you tie up the end, there is no unusual hump subconjunctivally.
Okay.
Sir, have you tried for dialysis just 240 encirclage, the routine encirclage that we do?
Okay. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, and my topic is buckle in unusual situation. So let's see what is unusual. So what the English literature is telling, this is uncommon, abnormal, atypical, unexpected, surprising, unfamiliar, or something different. Okay, so let's see what is something different in buckle. So I'll just have some clinical case, which is like little unusual than the recommendation retinal detachment, which is the clear-cut indication of buckle. So my first case is, say this is a 3-month-old baby who was diagnosed and treated for ROP, and after 3 months, there was a segmental almost at 3 clock per hour. There is a retinal detachment which is in the peripheral part, not involving the macula. So let's see what the literature is telling. So this is a nice article from current opinion in ophthalmology, published in 2008, where they found out that in peripheral retinal detachment not involving macula, when you put a encirclage band, 240 band only, the chances of settling the retina is almost around 67%. So it's quite high for a ROP case. And what they have concluded that the most common complication is induced myopia, and for which they this has to we have to remove the buckle usually after 3 months, and in this situation they have recommended that you should put a buckle with a moderate to high buckle effect to get maximum benefit. The most problem during the procedure is raised intraocular pressure, for which repeated paracentesis is indicated. So the take-home message is, in case of stage 4 ROP, scleral buckle is a good procedure. The next question is, this is a 36-year-old male who was injury with a stick, and ultrasound shows there is a induced PVD and vitreous hemorrhage. So, and it is very thick, vision is very poor, need a vitrectomy. So let's see what the literature is, what the medical evidence is telling. Yes, what they have concluded that prophylactic scleral buckle reduces the incidence of retinal detachment after surgery. So the recommendation is encircles solid silicone band 240, 360 degree. The third scenario is this is a 56-year-old male who has undergone a vitrectomy for a trauma, but we have not put a 360 band. At the final checkup, there is a small pocket of SRF inferiorly. There is no clear-cut break. There is a suspected break, which may be pre-existing or may be laser-induced, okay, with a small pocket of fluid. So what are the options? So yes, we can do the laser barrage, but this is not a permanent solution. Yes, we can do a silicone oil removal with endolaser with re-silicone injection, but probably this is a bigger procedure. And the third option is that we can put a segmental buckle, or there is a segmental buckle with a 360-degree belt buckle, with or without turners. I just find out the literature. This is a nice article in Retina published in 2014, but they have concluded that it is the putting a scleral buckle is as effective as the vitreoretinal surgery, and it is less invasive, and the most important thing is that economically it is much better. So in case of silicone oil filled eye, if there is a small pocket of SRF, buckle is one of the option where there is not much PVR changes is there. The third situation is that this is a 36-year-old male who has undergone a pneumoretinopexy, but unfortunately there is a failure. So there is a small amount of fluid is there, a small amount of gas bubble is there, and how to manage. So what the option are, we can do a laser barrage, yes, superior nasal, but superior and quite significant amount of SRF is there. So laser barrage, though it is can possible, but probably I think I'll not advise. So we can do a vitreous surgery. What about the scleral buckle? So the literature shows that yes, it is an option, but the chances of combination of scleral buckle with a vitrectomy is much better. So in this situation, yes, it can be used. It can be used, but always explain to the patient that the chances chances of vitrectomy is always there. So in case of failed pneumatic retinopexy, we can try. The next scenario is this is a patient who has undergone a successful buckle, but unfortunately after five months, around 6 months after surgery, there is a small atrophic break which is away from the buckle, posterior to the belt buckle, and with a small pocket of fluid, and the fluid is almost touching the arcade. So though it is laser we can do, but it is not advisable, and we can do a vitreous surgery. But what about the revision buckle? Revision buckle, probably I think it is a history now. Though in our early part of our career, we have seen few revision buckle. So I'll just highlight about something about the revision buckle. This is a procedure which is indicated where there is the brake is not in the position, the buckle is not in the position to support the brake, or if the height is not adequate, or the brake is somewhere like some other area, or there is a new brake, or sometimes if there is the CRA patches, the cryo the effect is not adequate, we can do that thing. Okay, and how to do? So suppose the brake is some other place, we can put an additional buckle. Suppose the height is not adequate, we can do little bit drainage to put the things. Suppose there is a new brake, we can additional brake, and suppose there is no CRF, this we can do some more cryo, and or we can put additional buckle over the buckle. Okay, so though this is a very invasive procedure, but this is an option. The next this is a baby who has undergone retinoblastoma treatment, and unfortunately he has a HST in the posterior pole, which is the most common site of break after treatment. So What are the options? Yes, this is our own publications where you have shown that like the scleral buckle is the ideal surgery after a treatment, after the cryo treatment of who patient undergoing retinal detachment. This is one more study who's clearly show that the good anatomical success and with scleral buckle without extraocular tumor extension, which is very important. The next is that this is a 23-year-old boy who having multiple angioma, and patient has undergone like anti-VEGF therapy. And let's see what the like literature is telling. Yes, retinal angioma, multiple in the periphery with severe tractional component. Even if there is no recommended retinal detachment, scleral buckle, either 360 encircle is banded or segmental buckle gives a good result. The last this is a patient with a multiple break, okay, and with a posterior ora. Yes, the literature clearly show that combined surgery, scleral buckling with a vitrectomy gives a better result. The last slide is a 13-year-old male which having a stick injury, and the patient was diagnosed as a annular chorioretinal detachment with a cyclodiaphragmatic cleft. So patient having a hypotony with a hypotony maculopathy with a less vision. So we have found out the literature which clearly shows that encircle buckling gives the improvement of the vision as well as the intraocular pressure. And the take-home message. Thank you so much. So my our next let me invite Dr. Saurabh. He will explain about the
Good evening, sir. Saurabh here.
Yeah. Hi, Saurabh. Yeah. Let me invite Dr. Saurabh. He will explain what the completion, what the bad thing about the buckle. We have seen all the good things, and he will tell what are the bad thing about the buckle. Yes, Saurabh, please.
Good evening. Thank you for the call because of some reason. So I will be talking about scleral buckle removal and how to go about it. So required in around 1 to 24% of eyes which undergo scleral buckle. That means a significant number of patients do require scleral buckle removal, and it can be done. And the common indications of buccal removal. Buccal removal may be required when there is a clinical infection, any clinical infection. There can be buccal intrusion inside the eye. The buccal can migrate anteriorly. There can be intraocular infection. They also require buccal removal. So how does a buccal exposure with clinical infection look like? This two pictures show that the picture on the left shows that there is buccal suture extrusion along with buccal exposure along with congestion. Another picture shows that it's a prolonged, long-standing exposure and there is congestion and fibrosis. That means there is it's a long-standing case and it is also a clinical infection. Where if you see this picture, there is buccal exposure, but the eye is quiet. There is only congestion. There is no exudate, and there is no fibroclinically looking infection. Then there is a dilemma because buccal which are asymptomatic without any infection can be observed even for decades without needing any removal. The patient can live like that. And so in these scenarios, we need to look at the patient's factors like age, the comorbidities, if the patient is one-eyed or not, because any buccal removal has its own complications. So we will avoid removal of a clinically asymptomatic buccal exposure in an eye in a patient who is one-eyed, and also the patient has to accept the inherent risk of retinal detachment in these eyes. So what our is of buccal exposure needing removal. So out of 93, almost 87% ultimately infection at one point of time ultimately develop clinical infection few years down the line and require removal. So in our removal, even if they are not having infection this is a small video which shows buccal intrusion noted during the surgery. Complete overlying retina and sclera is completely necrosed. So this is not the buccal. The migration can happen into the eye, or it can extend even up to the skin in the periocular area. It's slowly migrating and it slowly cuts through the muscles and goes near the limbus. If the patient becomes symptomatic or then requires removal. And obviously, if a sign forms over the skin, the buccal will need removal. Indication of patients requiring buccal removal. So how do we do about it? Do we select local anesthesia? So local anesthesia is suitable in most of the eyes and long back. So implants are notorious for perforation and rupture during removal. Removal, then it definitely requires the steps have to be followed completely. The limbal conjunctival opening has to be done. Conjunctiva should always be opened at the limbus local and if you find that the buccal is exposed in a particular and then we can put a anchor there. First step is cutting the band and then remove microbiological analysis of suture plant material have to be done most of the time. It is the it is Staphylococcus epidermidis and all the commensal bacteria which are found in the conjunctival sac usually cause this disease. One family can go as high one-third down the line. Most of the time there is a new break, or there can be opening of the page if defect usually doesn't go away completely. Existing breaks are likely to open, but common cause. Perforation is the complication. This small video. Low perforations mostly happen when we have scleral implant, or when we have removed a buccal which had infection and complications. So for this scleral where we see that while removing the band, scleral to after removing the band, we have to put sutures posteriorly, and this suture will be used to the perforation has to be sutured first, and the perforation we'll have to find size. Graft has have to be removed, and now the patch graft can be sutured anteriorly, and glue is being used to place the suture patch graft nicely. So in this scenario, when we have a scleral perforation or two patch, and a scleral patch graft most of the times required, and we have to be very gentle. Common complications which we need to keep in mind while dealing with scleral buccal infection.
Thank you, Dr. Saurabh. Actually, what I'm probably the network little problem was there. The voice was not so clear. Okay, so thank you all the participants and all the speakers. Any question? Any specific question from the audience? No. Okay. So probably I think with this so many good like speaker, I think you have a good vision of the what how the buckle and how it will help you in the future. So
thank you so much, Dr. Swaksharya, and for being a chairperson, and to all the renowned speakers for enlightening this session. So the session has been concluded, and now we will move on to next session at 4:30 p.m. So hope we see you back.
thank you.
Thank you so much.